arduous task of the final panel for the day. So I'm sure will be as obviously I'm looking forward to their erudition, and it will be as interesting as you have seen the day gone by. We have had a stellar cast today at our so this day-long event. We have seen the policymakers, the people who have been the big guys of the industry, uh, the entire ecosystem, so to say, how exactly this India 2047 dream, if it has to be achieved, how it can be done. I'll not take much of the time. This has to be purely conversational. I'll ask you the first question, Videsh. You run, as we were having this conversation, one of the most, I think it's the busiest airport, not only in India, it will be busiest airport by the very size of India as well, compared to other economies as well. My question to you is, have we done enough in the civil aviation space in this country? Also, what has your experience been, given that you operate an airport like Delhi, which comes with its own set of challenges?
Sure. So, Utpal, firstly, my name is Videh and not Videsh. Just to correct.
I'm so sorry, my apologies.
It's okay, it's not a very easy name to pronounce, so I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
So, in terms of civil aviation, I think this is one of the fastest growing sector that we have seen in the last 10 to 15 years. In fact, ever since the privatization, which typically began in 2004, I think it has given a kicker to the overall sector. So today, for example, within the last 10 years, the number of airports have more than doubled. In fact, there used to be 74 operational airports. Today, we have got 157 operational airports. In terms of demand has been shooting up. So today, we have got close to about 780 aircrafts which operate in India, and there are already more than 1,000 aircrafts on order by different airlines. And at the current growing rate, our number of passengers, which currently are about 370 million passengers, that is 185 departure, 185 arrival. So at the current growth rate of even 7%, every 10 years it's going to double. So actually, if we look at 2047, we possibly will be double the size of what the US is today in terms of number of flights. And it is not an exaggeration, because if we look at the penetration of aviation in India, it is only about 5%. And what we have witnessed is that with rising income, typically aviation and travel and hence aviation grows faster than the economic growth. An empirical number, you can take that whatever is the economic growth, you can possibly say that 50% higher will be the growth of aviation in at least the next 10 years. So that is where we see aviation going. So from current 375 million to close to about 1.5 billion by 2047. That typically means that you need to have the supporting infrastructure for this. So from 157 airports, possibly you need to go to triple the number to about 450 airports. You need to possibly have at least 3 times the number of aircrafts. So while we are talking about 800 aircrafts today, typically 2,500 aircraft.
Wow.
Now to support all these operations, then airports also, even airports like metro airports need to expand. And that is something that I think we have seen over a period of time. And the government strategy, I think, has worked quite well in that. Just to give you an example, I think PPP was a master stroke as far as aviation sector is concerned. To give you an example of Delhi Airport, in the last 16 years that GMR is operating Delhi Airport, we have invested 30,000 crores in different developments.
Mm-hmm.
And over and above that, about 22,000 crores we have given to Airport Authority of India as revenue share. So overall, government has saved 30,000 crores and gained 22,000 crores. So this 50,000 crores they have been able to invest back in the sector for developing all these newer airports. So this is a very sweet cycle that they have been able to bring in through a PPP.
So the Delhi airport has helped build airports across the country.
Yes, most of the
In a
private
way.
airports have contributed towards that because it has released government's investment because it's the private operator who is actually investing as well as paying back to AI in terms of revenue share, which in turn actually can be invested into not so profitable airports.
So in your view, are we, so given that obviously as you mentioned, civil aviation grows exponentially faster than the economic growth, and obviously this also tells you what's in store for the economy as well. So given that the thrice the number of airports that we need right now, how suited are we as a country on that trajectory?
I think we are pretty much there. I think the Udan scheme that government has started, most of the routes have become profitable. And with newer aircrafts coming in where then airfares are likely to then get moderated further, I think penetration is going to go up. Just to give you a number, like Delhi airport, we have got close to about 15 to 16% of first-time flyers. So these are the people who typically upgrade from taking a train to taking a flight. So that is what is actually driving the growth, and that is what we expect to continue in future also.
Right. Also, given that infra does, in a sense, everything around us, for cities need to develop. Obviously, airports play a very important role in all of this. Also, energy is a part of the overall mix as well. Obviously, you need to fuel these cities. You need to fuel all this infrastructure, electricity there. I wanted to ask you this question, Yash. How has been your experience? Because the Indian, as in there was a time when peak loads used to be that we knew exactly what a peak load was. It used to be early in the morning, and then it used to be in the evenings as well. The very definition of peak has gone out of the window. So we don't know what a peak load today is. And I would like you to make an opening remark as well on your views on the thoughts of the subject, and how suited is India today to fuel this growth? As in when we need to become, when we want to play with the big boys, or we want to be the big boy in 2047, how are we poised for that?
Thanks Utpal. So the definition of peak load, Utpal, is actually going to get even more complicated down the line because of the influx of EVs and of the overall electrification of transportation across the country. And the grid today is definitely not ready as of today, I would say, to accept that kind of dramatic change that the sector is going to experience. Case in point, even if you look at Gurgaon as a city, even today you end up having about anything between 15 to 25% of your daytime electricity being supplied from diesel gensets, because there are power cuts during the summers, since the power infrastructure in the city is not geared to handle that kind of infra. A lot of the areas in Gurgaon that were originally residential have gotten converted to commercial, and so the density of power consumption in those areas has gone extremely high, and the city was never geared to have that kind of infra upgrade, or they did not have the visibility as to what kind of upgrade they needed in order to cater to the requirements. So in order to meet the requirements of the grid in 2047, the country is actually embarked on this very, very ambitious program to digitize 100% of the country's power grid. So there's about 25 crore electricity connections in India, which are all getting converted to what's known as smart electricity meters. So 100% of India's...
The prepaid meters.
The prepaid meters,
before
yeah.
I consume, I need to pay. It
Correct.
also changes the consumer's habit as well.
Correct, absolutely. So there's a big behavioral change aspect that consumers will go through, where for a bulk of the country it was okay to not even pay the bills. They'll have to now pay in advance. But the other very important aspect that smart meters do is that it's going to be able to preempt what kind of infra upgrade you require and when. Because as opposed to you getting one data point per month, which is just your one reading per month, a smart meter communicates back to you once every 15 minutes. So you know the exact load, you know the exact voltage, you know the exact status and the stress on your infrastructure every 15 minutes. You have a beat every 15 minutes of the entire power infra. And this is something which is going to be extremely, extremely powerful to build the grid of 2047.
So just to a question there. So while we are talking about things which are as in front of the meter, that's a pure electricity coming in. What is happening behind the meter? So a smart meter will not be purely a smart meter for electricity. It will also become a lot of other things then. IoTs of the technology itself lends itself to it. What's happening there? So will it become so the way that we have seen progress happening in other sectors, will it be the one point contact with everything that I need? Maybe it communication, be it data. What is the experience? Because that has been the experience elsewhere.
Right. So I basically like to call smart meters like the UPI of the power infra, of power sector. Just like everything that UPI has enabled in finance, smart meters would start enabling for power. To give you some examples of use cases, so in India right now we are at about 21-22% influx of renewables. In order to cater to the rising energy demand of the country, and I mean India, by the way, the rate at which energy demand is growing in the country is amongst the fastest in the world. And we are just in terms of current consumption levels, we are only about 10% of say what the per capita electricity consumption is in the US. So we have a long way to go. And I mean, despite that, the overall I mean infra that's there in India is going to get difficult to manage with I mean the quantum of new users and the quantum of power increase that's going to happen. So one use case where on I mean how smart meters is going to enable this transition is that say for example in Rajasthan there's about 30% of the total state's electricity consumption which is with agriculture pumps. Now an agriculture pump in technical terms is known as what's called as a slack load. It's time insensitive. Doesn't matter when you are going to irrigate the field. You can irrigate it in the morning, in the night, in the evening, whenever. So with smart meters there, you could actually control and operate the irrigation of all 30% of Rajasthan's load when you are generating power from wind and solar. So you could interlink your Genco, Transco and your consumption without I mean adding a single new power plant. So in a sense what you've done is you've created a virtual power plant for 30% of a state's complete electricity consumption.
Better load management.
With I mean just putting digital technology at the consumer's end. You're turning it on, you're turning it off exactly when you have adequate supply coming in from renewables. And this is what is going to enable us to go from 20% to about 40-45% pure renewables. Like not including hydro, just like solar and wind, we'll be able to I mean get to about 40% because of the power of this technology.
And absolutely, and we have seen that being leveraged in sector after sector, and that brings me to you. He mentioned EVs. You are one of the largest auto component manufacturers. You have got not only you're present across the globe as well. This huge push for green mobility, we have seen in the budget as well. There have been enough announcements, which the government has been making successive announcements as well. FAME, the new iteration, FAME 3 now. As I posed the question earlier, one, on the mobility part of that debate, how good has India been, and going forward from where you are looking at this, where do you see the space evolving, and how good are we going to be? Are we going to be as good as anyone else in the world? Given, and I'm not talking about only till 2047, because obviously that's what the goalpost is. But what do you see in the immediate, these years as well, that's going to follow in this decade?
So let's start with the definition of mobility. Anything that transports human beings or goods is mobility. So it's not just the passenger car, it's everything. The form factor today may not be the same form factor tomorrow. But regardless of how you do it, there has to be a power source. There has to be a prime mover to move these devices. And what he said, actually, what Yash said brings me back to, in 2016 we started our EV journey. One of the things we did was we traveled around the world at that time to figure out what's happening where. We went to Yokohama and met Chademo, who told us that unless you have smart grid and you can actually manage power well, electrification taking off in the country will be a challenge for your country, which till date has been a challenge. So we've done well. Most of our EV revenue comes from United States, Europe, China, and then India. India is fourth. It is because, let's say you put fuel in your vehicle, when you come back after a few days, the fuel's still there. The power will dissipate. There's no way to give it back to the grid. So you have to be able to work it both ways. A lot more needs to be done, because if you look at how we are progressing, if we look at the industrial growth rates that we aspire for, we do not have the infrastructure today, and the rate at which we are building infrastructure is far too slow to catch up to it. If we want manufacturing to be 25% of GDP and GDP to grow at 7%, manufacturing today is about 17. That means you want manufacturing to grow at about 10% every year. Industrial infrastructure is not growing at 10%. Power, we consume a few gigawatt hours of power every year, right? We've been doubling every 3 years roughly. Till 2047, that's, well, even if we double 4 times, that's 2 to the power 6, 64 times more power I just need as one company. Who's going to give it to me? Where is this power coming from? Can we make it smarter so with the same amount of power we can get it? Because the entire function of cleaner mobility is spoiled if the power used to generate the parts, the vehicles, comes from, well, dirty sources, right? Yeah. So there is a big challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges is this, that in India, infrastructure is lagging industrial growth by quite a bit. The second would be around people. And when you say mobility, the mobility of people within this country also needs to be made better, especially the talent. If we do not have the talent to feed this growth, we again would have an issue. So a lot more on digitization has to happen. I think we've done a fantastic job. He mentioned UPI, Yash. I think the similar kind of thing needs to be done across sectors. Frankly, skill availability should be that. Mr. Pawar is here, so we've been asking him for some of these things, that can you make talent available online and we know where is what talent? It is hard. If you want to grow at the rate we do, these would be the 2 biggest challenges till 2047. Not just mobility, across every sector. Sure. But yes, obviously mobility, if we say 25% of GDP is manufacturing, half of that will come from our sector.
So right now, India, as you said, contributes, it's at the 4th position in your overall pie of revenue. We've been, so on the EV space, and my question is limited to the EV space on this. We have seen there was a time when the BYDs of the world wanted to come in here and stuff, and obviously what happened on our borders, it kind of soured relationships. Obviously then we came up, the regulation is already in place, investment coming from any country that India shares borders with has to be approved by the competent authority. There have been enough Chinese companies who want to invest here, but obviously those approvals are pending. How important is China to the EV story for India, given that we do not manufacture those? As of today, the technology available, lithium is, obviously we don't mine enough lithium. The lithium triangle has already been cornered by the Chinese companies, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, where our companies have been trying to. So when you want to build the building blocks, you need to be present across the value chain. How important is China to our game?
So the best time to start in building a battery ecosystem would have been 15 years ago.
So have you missed the bus?
The second best time is now. There is no missing the bus when technology revolutions are concerned. What has happened is we missed the first two waves, right? Now we move to LFP. The thing with batteries anyway, if you are investing in LFP today and by the time those capacities come online 10 years later, you're already behind. So it is a good chance for India to leapfrog and go towards technologies that are not existent today. I think we can do a lot more in sodium. We should look at lithium metal. We should look at solid state. Because that's the way to do it. You know why our airports are much better than US airports? Videh just talked about Delhi airport. When I travel, the US airports are pathetic. Indian airports are actually far better managed. Because we did leapfrog a generation. Their old crumbling infrastructure to keep building brick on a crumbling foundation is a tricky thing. So I think we should look at it as an opportunity, not as a missed thing that we are 15 years late. Okay, so now you know most of lithium is cornered. Maybe there is other thing. I mean, theoretically, the first column of the periodic table, every single element on that can be used for this, right? So it can be sodium, it can be potassium, it's got to do with chemical. We have enough bright minds. It does require a lot of capital, but more than that, what it requires is a much more willing attitude towards failure. We have been, at least the older generations, we've been taught to fear failure. Failure is seen as a very big taboo. But if we said failure is not so bad and we'll try 5 things, 3 will not work, 2 will work, I think we can do a lot more. And I think that's an opportunity. We did that with our banking system in this country. We've done with airports and aviation infra. I think we can do that with batteries too. Why not?
Right. So China or no China doesn't matter to us.
Why should it? I mean, one of the things I think is we are looking at this problem very linearly, that this has happened, hence this is the only way to do this. It isn't necessarily. If you look at our two-wheeler industry where EV has at least some traction, we've done far better actually. And we've done it in a slightly different way. Yes, batteries still there is dependency, but other things it isn't. Can we replicate that across other segments of mobility? Yes, you can. And it will eventually happen. And it's not that it's all China, right? You can partner with the Koreans for battery ecosystem if you want. Most of the American customers of ours are partnering with
I remember when the one of the PLI schemes was getting announced. There was a company from Korea which claimed to be a brand name of a company which later said that we are not, that's not our company, there's something else. The entire PLI process got scrapped. It had to be, the entire thing had to be revisited, but that was as an aside. I want you to come into the conversation and tell us that the way that we are building the civil aviation infrastructure in the country, now some of the big, obviously we are talking about the metro airports, which have done very well. We have seen the traffic, as you also mentioned in our conversation earlier, how this Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik, the Udan scheme has done so well. What about the non-metro airports? Now, obviously, privatization is also going to happen for a lot of other metros, a lot of other airports as well. What's happening in the non-metro airport space right now?
When we are seeing the growth in civil aviation, it's across the spectrum. So, in fact, more than metro airports, now non-metro airports have started growing faster because many of the metro airports were capacity constrained. Because typically in any infrastructure, there is always a time lag between when you need the capacity if you don't predict it properly. So typically we make about 10 years of a master plan, but then suddenly the whole equation, so whole dynamics changed, and it grew much faster than what was anticipated way back in 2016 when we did our last master plan. So if you see the smaller towns, whether it is Patna, whether it is Ranchi, whether it is Bhubaneswar, these are the cities which have actually shown much bigger growth than places like Mumbai, who is capacity constrained completely. Delhi, where we were capacity constrained, now we have expanded the capacity. Bangalore also has just now expanded the capacity. Hyderabad has expanded the capacity. but you typically see close to about double the growth in non-metro sectors than actually in all the metro sectors put together.
Why is this happening?
This is happening because firstly, there are a lot of connectivity which is happening between non-metro to non-metro. Earlier, if you had to say go from Indore to Bhubaneswar or Patna to Bhubaneswar, you had to come to Delhi or you had to go to Calcutta. From Calcutta, you had to take a connecting flight. Now you have got a direct flight, so in terms of your travel time, it comes down, your convenience actually comes down. That is one. Second, with newer airports, because as I talked about in the last 10 years, from total of about 74 airports, now we have got 157 airports. Most of these airports are in the smaller cities. So, and some of those cities have been really eye-openers. I mean, if I just name one or two, like Devghar is in Jharkhand. When it opened, nobody actually expected the kind of traffic that you would get from there. Now, that is possibly the costliest sector. That
Exactly the point I was trying to make. It's very difficult to buy a ticket to Devghar. I come from Bhagalpur. It's very difficult to get that ticket. It's
Okay,
exorbitantly expensive.
I hit close to home. So, that is where it was not available. So, somebody from Devghar to come all the way to Patna to take a flight would take him 5 hours, and then flying from there to Delhi would be another 2.5 hours. So overall he would have spent 9 to 10 hours, keeping a buffer possibly 12 hours. If he takes a train, he will reach possibly in 16 hours. So it was not making sense. Now that reduction in time because of direct connectivity is something which is fueling the growth.
Right. Also, when we talk about civil aviation in the country, railways on its part has also, and this is the government has also been saying this, that they want the railways. Your immediate competition is the railways right now, because obviously not everyone, and also the world-class railway system that is being created today. Also, we have seen this new trains being introduced. What kind of competition do you see railways posing to the civil aviation space?
I think the travel industry itself has got such a huge growth that I don't see that as a competition. In fact, I see that more and more travel getting promoted. There are people, as I talked about 15% first-time travelers, they basically upgrade themselves from railways to the aviation. So that is something which actually from bottoms up fueling that hunger for travel. Yes, in terms of the cargo movement, especially domestic cargo movement, we have seen a change in the structure of how cargo is moving. So we have seen a little bit of pressure on normal domestic cargo movement, which is typically 30% of the total cargo, air cargo, because a lot of that is moving through the highways, because they are much better connected highways, so it connects much faster. But on the other hand, because of express cargo actually growing at about 18%, 17%, 18% because of e-commerce, that is getting compensated by that.
Right.
So there will always be that juggling of the different sectors, different types of businesses which will happen with different modes of transport.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a few minutes left now. I would like to open the floor for a few questions. Please raise your hand. A microphone will be given to you. Please introduce yourself and the organization that you represent. And please make it out to be a question rather than a discussion point, which we might need another event for that. So I see a hand there. If someone can please.
Hi, I'm Sneha from Mint. Throughout the discussion, there's one very interesting point. The first set of infra investors never made money in India. We have seen that a lot of money has flown into infrastructure, be it traditional infrastructure, power, new age power generation. what more should we do to reach that 2047 dream, where we'll see large pools of capital unlocking into India, especially into infrastructure, because the demand is huge, and that can be met only if we are able to access those cheaper pools of capital.
Vivek, would you like to take the question?
Sure. So we all stand on the shoulder of giants. So there are people who come in early, maybe they did not make so much money, but because of their efforts, we have what we have. But all investment returns, regardless of what it is in, it's in infra or anything else, will be dependent on how quickly you can get to profitability and then how sustainable is that profit, right? These are the two things. I don't think we have a problem from the demand side. I think managing cost, managing timeliness, and there is a role that government can play, is ensuring that the roadblocks do not happen because of the government. If you can get things done faster, for example, if I have to set up a new factory and the industrial park license guy takes a year to get it done, my returns are delayed by a year. And hence the probability of making money back at the rate I wanted is lower. I think that's where it can be managed. Otherwise, it is always going to be the fundamentals. If you read the demand and supply situation wrong, if you got your costing wrong, you will not make money. So that's where it's at.
Thank you. We have closed the session in time.